For those of you who follow our channel, you may have noticed that we love to share different stories, surprising facts, and places that hardly anyone talks about. But there is a special corner of this planet that leaves many of those places far behind. So, if you think you've seen everything in this big world, it's because you haven't been to Tanzania yet. Here there are lions that climb trees, chimpanzees that declare war, and people who mix blood with milk for breakfast. In Tanzania, there are tribes that hunt with poison, rituals that will leave you speechless, and a way of looking at life that seems to come from another time. In other words, if you're into different cultures, unusual nature, and stories that seem made up but are real, pull up a chair and get comfortable. Today, Bello Mundo lands in Tanzania, and what you'll see here doesn't even seem like it's from the same planet. Number 1. Location and geographical data. Tanzania is located in Eastern Africa, right next to the Indian Ocean. It borders 9 countries: Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Zambia, Malawi, and Mozambique. It's like a huge meeting point, surrounded by different cultures, but with its own identity that cannot be confused with any other. It is the kind of country that has a little bit of everything, and when we say everything, we mean it. It has beaches with crystal clear water, golden savannas, tropical forests, ice-capped mountains, salt lakes, and even a volcanic crater. It is a collection of landscapes that seem to come from completely different movies, but all occupy the same map. The country is also embraced by 3 of the largest lakes in Africa: Lake Victoria, which is the largest, Lake Tanganyika, one of the deepest in the world, and Lake Malawi, also known as Nyasa, which is home to impressive aquatic biodiversity. And this is not just a beautiful setting. These lakes supply millions of people and are home to species that exist nowhere else on the planet. The official capital is Dodoma, located right in the center. But the most populous and busiest city is Dar es Salaam, on the coast. This is where the ports, businesses, and much of urban life are located. Among the great natural symbols are Mount Kilimanjaro, the highest point in Africa, with its white ice cap just a stone's throw from the equator, and the Ngorongoro crater, a kind of natural shelter where wildlife has lived in balance for thousands of years. In addition, more than 16 national parks protect areas of forest, plains, and savanna, which we will talk about later. This is where nature happens without filters, with millions of animals migrating en masse and crossing landscapes that have changed little since ancient times. Speaking of ancient times, Tanzania has a history that goes way back. Like way back. Number 2. History. They say that everyone came from Africa, but when it comes to this country, that's almost literal. It was there, in the Olduvai Gorge region, that archaeologists found traces of the first hominids on the planet. We're talking about fossils that are over 2 million years old. In other words, this soil was trodden long before any civilization we know by name. Many centuries later, the Bantu peoples arrived. They are groups originating in Central Africa who migrated to the east and south of the continent, spreading languages, traditions, and ways of life that form the basis of various ethnic groups that live there to this day. And then the history of Tanzania follows 2 different paths. On one side, the mainland, called Tanganyika. On the other, the island of Zanzibar, each with its own colonization, different cultures, and even separate political relations. Tanganyika was dominated by Germany at the end of the 19th century. Zanzibar, on the other hand, was under Arab control, more specifically that of the Sultan of Oman. Oman is a country on the Arabian Peninsula across the Indian Ocean, which controlled several trade routes at that time. The Sultan even transferred the capital of the empire to the island itself. Such was the importance of Zanzibar in maritime trade, especially in slaves. After World War I, the scenario changed. Germany lost control of Tanganyika, which passed into British hands. Zanzibar also came under British control, but in a different way. While in Tanganyika the rule was direct, on the island the British preferred to keep the Sultan as a central figure, ruling through him. They were in charge, but without appearing so much. It was a way of controlling the region without occupying it directly. They stayed behind the scenes while the sultans were the local leaders. It was only in 1961 that the country gained its independence. A few years later, Tanganyika united with the Zanzibar archipelago, and that's when the name Tanzania came about, a combination of the two names. Even so, each side maintained its own characteristics. Zanzibar, for example, continues to have its own government and a completely unique culture. And since we're talking about this place, it's worth dedicating a section just to it. Number 3. Zanzibar. It may seem strange, but this archipelago is both part of Tanzania and not part of Tanzania at the same time. It is part of it, but it functions semi-autonomously. It has its own president, regional government, local parliament, and even specific laws in areas such as culture, religion, and justice. However, in practice, it is not an independent country. The central government in Dodoma is responsible for foreign policy, defense, and broader national issues. In other words, Zanzibar has one foot in and one foot out. And there's a curious fact that almost no one knows. Freddie Mercury, the lead singer of Queen, was born there. He lived in Zanzibar until his teens before moving abroad. In fact, we already have a full video about this peculiar little place here on our channel, full of stories and traditions you've never seen before. When you finish this one, you know what to do. Go check it out. And since Zanzibar loves to surprise, it is also where one of the most unusual events in modern history took place, a 40-minute war. Number 4. The fastest war in history. In 1896, the Sultan of Zanzibar died. On the same day, another pretender to the throne, who was not exactly the darling of the British, declared himself the new Sultan. England did not like this at all. It issued an ultimatum. It gave him 2 hours to give up the idea. He did not give up. At 9 o'clock the next morning, British cannons began firing. The Sultan's palace went up in smoke, and before 9:40, the war was over. Officially, it was 40 minutes of conflict, practically the time it takes to eat a quick lunch. The result? A new sultan, a country even more controlled by the British, and the shortest war in human history. But while history books recount these lightning battles, what really defines this country is its people. And that's what we're going to talk about now. Number 5. Population, religion, and beliefs. Few places in the world can bring together so many different people in the same territory as Tanzania. There are more than 65 million inhabitants, divided into more than 120 ethnic groups, living side by side, each with their own language, customs, beliefs, and particular way of seeing life. The official language is Swahili, or Kiswahili in its original name. It not only connects people within Tanzania, but is also spoken in neighboring countries such as Kenya, Uganda, and parts of Congo. However, English is also widely spoken, especially in government, schools, and business. But these are not the only languages spoken there. It is estimated that there are over 100 languages spoken there. In other words, communication there is almost a daily exercise in adaptation. In religion, diversity remains strong. Christianity predominates in the interior of the country, while Islam is stronger in coastal regions and on islands such as Zanzibar. And even with these major religions present, many communities remain steadfast in traditional African beliefs, which place nature, ancestors, and spiritual rituals at the center of life. In certain places, it is common to use herbal baths, amulets, and verses from the Quran in purification and protection rituals. Amulets, called hirisi, are worn on the body as shields against envy, disease, or any negative energy. And it is precisely this mixture of origins and beliefs that shapes the way Tanzanians live their daily lives, greet each other, relate to each other, and even choose whom to marry, as we will see below. Number 6. Customs, etiquette, and traditions. In Tanzania, the way people interact with each other on a daily basis follows a code of respect that, at first glance, may go unnoticed, but is taken very seriously by those who live there. Greeting someone, for example, is not just a formality. It is a ritual. Hands are shaken firmly and may remain joined for a few seconds longer than is customary in the West, and always with the right hand. This custom originates from religious and cultural values inherited from centuries of Islamic influence in the region, which believes that the left hand is unclean. Another striking gesture is to place your hand on your chest when thanking or refusing something. It is a polite and silent way of showing gratitude or refusal with elegance. And when an older person enters a room, younger people stand up. Respect for age and wisdom is a highly valued principle. In more traditional regions, silence is seen as a virtue. Speaking little conveys prudence and consideration. Talking too much can be frowned upon. These social rules are even more evident at weddings. In rural areas, many marriages are still arranged by families. Once the proposal is accepted, a series of rituals begins that can last several days. There are family introductions, blessings from elders, distribution of fabrics, and even separate ceremonies for men and women. In some regions, traditional marriage involves the delivery of cows as a dowry, and the number of animals varies according to the agreement between families, or, as they say there, the bride price. And if marriage already reveals a lot about Tanzanian values, just wait until you see the rituals that are part of life here. Number 7. Rituals. In Tanzania, each stage of life carries a ritual, a ceremony, or a symbolic gesture that connects the present to the ancestors. From childhood to old age, customs take on unique contours, shaped by time and tradition. Among the Maasai, one of the country's best-known peoples, the beginning of adulthood does not come with speeches or parties. It comes with a test of courage. Boys undergo public circumcision without anesthesia. Showing pain is unacceptable. The idea is to show that they are ready for the responsibilities of adulthood, firm, silent, and honoring their ancestors. This same group also maintains another custom that often shocks outsiders, but which has enormous symbolic significance: the consumption of fresh ox blood mixed with milk. They do this at important moments, such as births, weddings, illnesses, or ceremonies of empowerment. The blood is extracted without sacrificing the animal and represents vital energy, spiritual connection, and renewal. Other peoples, such as the Zaramo and Makonde, perform ceremonies with dancing, carved masks, and spiritual trances. On these occasions, they believe they connect with their ancestors, who guide and protect the community. The Makonde still produce sculptures called ujama, representing entire generations in the form of human towers carved from wood. It is a visual way of keeping alive the memory of those who came before. The Hadzabe, who follow an almost untouched way of life, still hunt with bows and arrows. However, the arrowheads are coated with a poisonous sap that can paralyze animals. This knowledge is passed down from generation to generation, transforming hunting into an ancestral ritual where man, the forest, and time walk together. Each people has its own codes, but they all share the same idea that to live is to be in communion. And if there is a moment that best represents this collective spirit, it is mealtime. Number 8. Gastronomy. Food in Tanzania is much more than just satisfying hunger. It is a social ritual, a moment of unity. And if you are invited to a meal there, be prepared to eat with your hands and, above all, with respect. The most emblematic dish is ugali. Made from corn flour cooked until it becomes a firm dough, it is almost a national institution. It is served with meat, vegetables, sauces, stews, but the highlight is the way it is eaten. No knives or forks. Each person shapes the ugali with their hands, makes a ball, dips it in the sauce, and savors it. Everything is done with the right hand, as we mentioned earlier. In more traditional families, meals are eaten on the floor, with everyone sitting on mats around a large shared platter. Another very popular dish is nyama choma, grilled meat, usually goat or beef, served with chili and lemon. There is also pilau, an aromatic rice dish full of spices such as cardamom and cinnamon, and mandazi, a fried donut-like pastry, but without filling. To accompany your meal, try tea with boiled milk, served sweet and hot, or tamarind, mango, or hibiscus juice. Now that you know the history, the people, the customs, the traditions, and the delicious food, it's time to discover the country's postcard-perfect landscapes, those with grandiose scenery that look like something out of a National Geographic documentary. Number 9. Places. This country is home to some of the most iconic natural landscapes in the world, and the most famous of all is the Serengeti National Park. The name comes from the Maasai language and means endless plains, and it's no wonder. These are fields that stretch as far as the eye can see, teeming with wildlife. This is where the famous Great Migration takes place, when millions of wildebeests, zebras, and antelopes move together in search of water and food. One of nature's greatest spectacles. Right next to the Serengeti is the Ngorongoro crater. It is what remains of a gigantic volcano that collapsed millions of years ago. Today, it is a kind of natural cauldron, with more than 20,000 large mammals living in balance within it. Many call it the African Eden. But as we mentioned at the beginning of the video, Tanzania is also the cradle of our own history. Between the Serengeti and Ngorongoro lies the Olduvai Gorge, one of the most important archaeological sites in the world. It was there that researchers found hominid fossils over 2 million years old, and nearby in Laetoli, there are fossilized human footprints, about 3.5 million years old, imprinted in volcanic ash. In other words, humanity's journey began right here. But this country also has a coastline. And what a coastline! Its beaches, bathed by the Indian Ocean, are a clear, almost translucent blue, with strips of white sand, coconut trees, and fishing villages that seem frozen in time. In places like Pangani and the mainland beaches near Dar es Salaam, you can dive with turtles, see colorful corals, and relax away from mass tourism. A true hidden paradise, savanna, jungle, sea, mountains, and even traces of the origins of humanity, all in the same country, coexisting in perfect harmony. This is Tanzania, diversity in the form of landscape. And in this grand setting, it goes without saying that the most emblematic inhabitants of African nature could not be missing. Number 10. Animals. Continuing our tour of Tanzania, it is only fair to talk about the true protagonists of the savannas, the animals. And when it comes to the big stars of African wildlife, it is impossible not to start with the famous Big Five: lion, elephant, buffalo, leopard, and rhino. The term originated in the days of sport hunting, but today it has become a symbol of conservation and responsible tourism. Seeing all five on the same safari is almost like completing a rare sticker album. Among them all, the lion always attracts the most attention. But in Tanzania, it surprises even the most experienced. Here, especially in the Lake Manyara and Serengeti regions, some groups have developed the unusual habit of climbing trees. And no, this is not common among lions. Those who usually climb tree trunks are lighter felines, such as leopards and jaguars. But Tanzanian lions have evolved and become true acrobats. Experts believe that this behavior arose for a combination of reasons: to escape the scorching heat of the ground, to escape insects such as tsetse flies, and of course, to gain a privileged position for rest and surveillance. The image of a lion perched on an acacia tree has become one of the most iconic images of tourism in the region. And since we're talking about animals in trees, how about chimpanzees going to war? That's right. In Gombe National Park in northern Tanzania, one of the most impressive episodes ever documented among primates was recorded. In the 70s, primatologist Jane Goodall observed a real dispute between two neighboring groups of chimpanzees. For 4 years, they fought each other in ambushes, planned murders, and territorial disputes. The episode became known as the Gombe Chimpanzee War. It was the first time that science had proven, with detailed records, that non-human primates were capable of organizing armed conflicts with strategies, alliances, and even retaliation. This behavior had previously only been associated with humans. In Tanzania, even animals tell stories that challenge what we think we know about the world. And that's why, wherever you look, there's always a surprise waiting for you. And so we end our journey through a country of ancient beauty, rich culture, and contrasts that challenge any simple idea. What did you think of these curiosities? Tell us in the comments. Thank you for joining us here, and see you on the next adventure through our Bello Mundo.